And I think it is for a lot of military folks coming out. I talked earlier about that passion and how we kind of have to redefine ourselves because we don't know who we are. I think the way to do that is to find something else that you're passionate about.
Hey, welcome to the Leadership Loading Podcast. I'm Jason McClaren.
Nick Padlo?
Hey, Nick, thanks for coming on the show today.
Yeah, appreciate it.
So, Nick is a Army veteran, former West Point alumni, and now he's working at Sophros.
You got it, Sophros.
All
Yep.
right, Sophros Recovery. We'll talk a little bit about that. But, Nick, tell us what led you to join the military.
Yeah, so I grew up here in Jacksonville, Florida. And it's actually interesting. I got a little card in the mail from West Point, like those little SAT cards you get from various schools, and it was at my favorite restaurant. And so I went because I figured it was a free meal. And by the end, I was like convinced I was joining the Army. And it turns out there was like no food there at all. So I actually went for the wrong reasons, but ended up being a great adventure. I was never, my dad served, my grandfather served, so I was never against it. I just kind of hadn't prioritized it. And then by the end of the little video, I was in.
Yeah, they kind of scooped you up there and tricked you into going to the dinner that wasn't there. That's funny.
Exactly.
I'm trying to remember my Air Force recruiting. I know I wanted to go in the Air Force, and I don't remember how they got me into the office. I think I just went to the mall and walked in the office, but I enlisted that way. But and what'd you do in the military?
So I left for West Point in '99, and then I was commissioned in 2003. So I was in from '03 to '08.
Good deal. And what was your MOS?
35 Delta. So I was a military intelligence officer, mostly with infantry guys. So I was the S2 for an infantry battalion in Afghanistan, and then in Iraq, I was on a MIT team. I was the S2 with the Iraqi Army.
Yeah, so you did from the notes, you did 5 years total and 27 months deployed.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
pretty,
That was we certainly were busy around that time for sure.
yeah, definitely. I did 6 years, almost seven, and then only I deployed for 12 months total. So yeah, not as busy as you were. So you earned the Bronze Star and Combat Action Badge, and then went on to Stanford.
I did, yeah. A lot of my friends had gotten out of the military, and kind of their solution was to, go back and do school, figure out what you want to do. Some of the guys on the enlisted side went to college. Some of them went to get a master's. Some of my friends went to get an MBA. But really, what it did was it kind of put me a couple years out where I had some time to figure out what life was going to look like.
Yeah, I think a lot of us transitioning try to figure it out. I know there's a lot of transition programs, and they get a lot of heat that the people running them have never served in the civilian sector, which is kind of odd. But that's kind of why we started this podcast. And Go Heroes, the producer of the podcast, is to help veterans and other people that are not veterans that are trying to step up their leadership styles. So it's one reason you're here today. So yeah, and I didn't get to transition. I didn't have like the full, how to write a resume class and all that. I had 20 days from, hey, you're getting out of the military, and I was out of the military. So definitely had to learn trial by fire there. But so let's move on to what you're doing now.
Yeah, so now I'm the founder and CEO of a treatment center. And so the name is Sophros Recovery, and we provide addiction and mental health treatment for people who are, struggling with alcohol, drugs, depression, anxiety, stuff like that.
And what led you to start that?
Yeah, so I got out of the military in '08, went to business school, and I started a business in pet cremation. Our goal was to, make the worst day for a pet owner a little easier. And business was doing well. We were growing. We were in, 8 states, and serving hundreds of thousands of families. But unfortunately, I wasn't doing well myself. And so I was struggling with alcohol. I was using drugs. I was depressed. I was having crippling anxiety, and I was really not functional. I was trying to run this business, and thankfully the business by and large was kind of running itself at that point. And so I kind of stayed under the radar for a little bit, just trying to get by. And eventually it got to a point where I needed to go get help. And so I left the company in 2018, went to get treatment twice. And I actually went to Cambodia for 3.5 months, just living in a temple there, practicing yoga and meditation full time, which is crazy for an army guy from the South, but it was just what I needed. And so went through that process and wanted to come back to Jacksonville, where I grew up, to be able to start something to help other people who are struggling with the same kind of stuff. And so that's really where Sophros was born.
And so, do you think some of your military time led to those troubles, or was it something
Yeah,
else?
I've thought about that for a while. Um, and I initially I always said no. Was that, I didn't have like that one moment I could point to and was like, oh, I got PTSD here. This was the moment, or I was mistreated in the military and so I coped with alcohol. Like none of that really happened for me. But as I look back on it and as we work with other veterans, I certainly see some of the same themes that I was probably experiencing. And I think one of them was just this like loss of identity. Like you spend a lot of your formative years in the military, from 18 to 28 for me, I was in uniform, and I didn't really know who I was on the outside. I didn't know what I was supposed to be. And so I think even though I was like, outwardly successful, I think it still it didn't feel fulfilling to me. And so I didn't really have that purpose. And then I think the other thing that we give a tendency to get into the habit of in the military is that we don't know how to ask for help. We're incentivized in the military to push through pain, to push through, challenges, and it suits us well in the military. But when it comes to mental health and substance use and stuff like that, like toughing it out doesn't really work.
Yeah, I going to what you said about the military. I was an Air Force firefighter, and it was just everything you're supposed to suck it up and move forward, and you're around all these manly men all the time. This was back before we had a lot of female firefighters in the Air Force, but you'd complain about something, they just tell you suck it up, and I paid the price on some of those things. With my side also, but what would you say about people that are like, hey, there's tons of recovery out there, why didn't you just go to one of those instead of starting your own?
Yeah, I mean, I think there were a couple of challenges, as I went through the process, I was an entrepreneur by, kind of at this point in my life, and going through that process that was like so emotional and so much work, right? I started to see places that I thought that we could make it better, that we could do more, especially for veterans, but for anybody, but especially for veterans. And so, as I looked at it, there's a level of care called it's residential level of care, which is like what we know as rehab, where you go and you stay there for 30 days. And there's some good residential programs out there. There's a lot of money that's been invested into the space, and they're like good programs. Um, but once you leave residential, or if you can't go to residential for some reason, there seemed to be this just big, massive drop off in quality of care. And so where we specialize is this, we call it partial hospitalization and intensive outpatient, which really what that means is that our clients are with us between 3 and 6 hours a day, but they go back to their homes, they go back to their lives. It's like for me, I think that was really where I started to gain some real skills in my recovery was when, I had to drive by the liquor store on the way home. I had to drive by the gas station. I had to get into a fight with my significant other. I had to have something bad go at work and then make the decision not to drink. Right. For me, it was easy to stay sober in rehab. I mean, there's no options. And I loved rehab. A lot of people hated it. Right. But for me, it was like a mental break for 30 days where I had nothing to do but work on myself. Like, what a great opportunity. Right. Um, but I, but it wasn't until I had to learn how to deal with life on life's terms and not use that I really started to learn how to be successful, like, in recovery. It hasn't been easy. I mean, there have been challenges and setbacks for me, for sure. But learning that process has been the most important thing for me.
Definitely. And what would you say have been some of the biggest challenge on basically, I mean, it's a startup, right? Getting the startup going and running it. What's been some of the biggest challenges?
I mean, I think the biggest challenge is for us has been like, you know, two things. One is just having people know who we are. Um, you know, in an industry where trust really matters, right? Like this is where you're going to recommend your loved one to go who, potentially might die otherwise, right? And so people don't just have to like know your name, they have to know your name and trust you to refer a friend or family member or client or whoever it is. And so it took a while for us to, establish that reputation. It's not just enough to say you're the best, but to really be involved in the community and talking to people and having conversations. And that's really how we got over it, was like getting out there and making ourselves known and being at events and talking to people. And then the second piece, I think, is just kind of inherent to this industry, which is, this whole insurance thing, right? Getting these contracts done. And I think my advice to, entrepreneurs is like, you know, figure out what you can do. And if you can't do it, outsource it. Find somebody that's an expert in it, because if I tried to figure that out, I'd be lost. I'd still be floundering around. And so, there's some things, obviously this industry's got specific things, but in every industry, there are going to be the same kinds of things where it's like, this is technical. This isn't my wheelhouse. I'm good at this mission. I'm passionate about this, but I don't know how to do this accounting side, or I don't know how to do this hiring side, or whatever it is. Like, don't be afraid to get help from somebody who does just that.
Yeah, definitely. It's not being the smartest person in the room, because you can get people there that are specialized in certain things and excel your business and, make it level up even more. So I've learned that with Go Heroes also, that I can't do everything. So definitely good information there. So Nick, if you were meeting a new leader, new entrepreneur, what would be your one piece of advice for them?
I think for me, and I don't know if this is applicable to everyone, but I certainly know it was for me, and I think it is for a lot of military folks coming out. I talked earlier about that passion and how we kind of have to redefine ourselves because we don't know who we are. I think the way to do that is to find something else that you're passionate about. Every day when we get up for work, it's a lot easier if we're passionate about what we do. And it doesn't mean it's like, if you love baseball, you have to do something in baseball, but if you have something you're passionate about, think about what those things are first and get the list of things that you really care about. And then from there, try to figure out what are the job opportunities that exist within that. An example might be, if you're super passionate about veterans, what are the industries that touch veterans? Okay, well, there's HR recruiting and hiring for veterans, in the civilian side. There's, organizations that help veterans with various things. There's a lot of industries that could potentially still allow you to fulfill your purpose and what you're passionate about while also being a business. And I think they're both important, right? You've got to have a viable business as well. But for me, I know I'm not going to be successful unless I'm at least passionate about the underlying like vision of the business. The time, I don't know if it ever came. I was gonna say the time passed where I could just sell widgets, but I don't know if that time ever came for me. I don't know if I ever would have been good at that. And then once you do that, build the whole business around that vision and mission, and make it something that you talk about every day. All of your policies and procedures should be made with your vision and your mission in mind, and your core values as well. So like what matters to you? And then in that way, the business becomes more of a living, breathing entity with like a soul, so to speak. Maybe that's hyperbole, but I don't know that it is.
Yeah, 100%. I think taking something you love or have a passion for and using that skill in whatever industry it is, especially with military veterans, there's a lot of jobs in the military that are not in the civilian world. And so taking that skill and tweaking it towards a civilian role, you can really excel or even start your own company and excel that way too. So good information there. Nick, so if people wanted to reach out to you guys over there, how could they do that?
Yeah, the easiest way is just to go online and visit us at sophrosrecovery.com. It's SOPHROS recovery.com. Or you can just give us a call on the main number on the website. If I always tell people, if you're struggling yourself, the hardest thing to do is pick up that phone. But sometimes you just have to do it. And if we're not the right fit, we'll help, find the place that is. And for the vets out there, if you're not located in Florida or you're not near us, like just call somebody. I hope that I've lost too many friends to substance use and mental health. And, first step is making that call. There's people out there that want to help.
Definitely. We'll put those links in the show notes below, and people can just click right on it and check you guys out.
Cool.
Nick, thanks for coming on the show.
All right. Thank you so much.
Hey, everybody. This episode of the Leadership Loading Podcast was brought to you by Go Heroes, Inc., goheroes.org. If you'd like to be a sponsor, go ahead and check out our website or email us, and we'll get you all the information you need.
There are thousands of leadership and management podcasts to choose from. We're glad you chose the Leadership Loading Podcast, a Go Heroes production. If you'd like to support Go Heroes, Inc., visit www.goheroes.org. And with that, it's time to wrap up today's show. Thank you so much for listening. We sincerely hope you liked it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this podcast with your family and friends. Let's all grow together. Thanks for listening to the Leadership Loading Podcast. Leadership inspired.